Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name is Sean Wasserkrug, and I'm here to review all the latest films in theaters and streaming, as well as anything that you guys recommend, whether it be recent films or old school movies. Before we get to today's video, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel, so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest information that pops up on YouTube, and also don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Now, for anyone who has been watching the channel, this is part 2 of our MCU movie rankings list. This is the top 10 of the 20 of the MCU films. So if you guys missed the first part, which ranked 20 through 11, feel free to go back to the YouTube channel. You should see it there and watch right away. Now this is from 10 to 1, the top 10 MCU movies in the franchise. Now this, like I said in the previous video, this is my personal opinion. This is what I feel is my top 10. There are some movies in this top 10 that many people probably don't like. There are some videos that, if you have not watched the first part of this video, there are some movies that are not in this top 10 that you feel that probably are in your top 10 or even top 5 that did not make this list. And if you go back to the first video, you will see my understanding and my reasoning for why they're not ranked in there. But like I said, these are my personal opinions. This is how I feel, and I feel like I do a pretty good job of explaining my reasonings for every film on why they are where they are on the list. I realize that your guys' opinions are your own, and we all have different ones. So feel free to respect my opinion and my list, as well as I respect yours. And feel free to leave your comments on the video below of your rankings. But just keep the hate out of it. Everyone's got entitled to their own opinion. I don't think any of you are wrong, just like I don't think I am wrong. That's the great thing about opinions. If you argue well enough, everyone's correct. So let's go ahead and get into the top 10 MCU films in the MCU universe. And to number 10, we're going to start off with what at one point was my favorite. But over the last few years, movies just kept getting better and better. And that's where it is, and that is number 10, The Avengers. I love The Avengers. I think it's a great movie. I have a lot of fun watching it. I think Joss Whedon does a great job directing this group. I'm a huge Joss Whedon fan. I mean, I love Buffy. I love Firefly and Serenity. So when I saw that he was going to take over The Avengers, I was super excited because I love his snappy dialogue. And with this cast and crew, I felt like he was going to do a fantastic job. And for the most part, he does. I love the first time interactions of everybody. Loki with Nick Fury, Loki with Captain America and Iron Man. Iron Man and Captain America and Thor's interaction in the forest was great. I love Loki's initial reaction or introduction to Black Widow when she tells him what Loki has done, and he goes, well, he's adopted. I love the witty banter between everybody. I love Hulk and Tony's, or Bruce Banner, and Tony's initial interaction with each other. The dialogue is great throughout. It's a great team-up movie. I mean, it was the first of them, so, I mean, they did a great job of doing the team-up. The action is great, whether it being their forest, little tiny forest battle, to obviously the massive Battle of New York, which is probably, to this day, one of the best fighting sequences filmed in the MCU, and does an incredible job all together with the Battle of New York. And Loki, I mean, everyone loves Loki, and I felt Loki was a great villain overall with the movie in itself, and I think he does a good job of tearing apart the Avengers and digging his claws deep into them, up until they finally rise up and assemble at the end of the movie. My only negative that I have with the Avengers film, and that's why it goes to number 10, is that it spends way too much time in the helicarrier. It is, the movie, I get that they're moving the puzzle pieces and they're getting some interactions and stuff like that, but they just spend way too much time up there. It feels stagnant at certain points. While they're moving the pieces around. The initial battle itself, when they get Bruce to Hulk out and everything's just going crazy, also feels a little long. Like, that middle piece right there is a good plus hour of the movie, and I feel like they could have done other things in the film to to make it a little bit better, in a sense. Because, I mean, it's like they all break up, in a sense, during this battle, but they all come together really, really quickly. And I feel like they could have probably had cut at least 10, 15 minutes out of the helicarrier scene and watch them kind of work to come together again. So that way they could take on Loki in the Battle of New York. But it's just way too much time in the helicarrier for my liking. So when I do go back and rewatch it, that middle part of the helicarrier is my least favorite part of the film. And that's why it comes in number 10. Other than that initial part there, loved everything about the movie, and that's why it is in the number 10 and at number 10 to boot. Going to number 9, and this is going to be a very unpopular opinion to some, and I'll admit, initially, when I first saw the movie, I agree, it was not a favorite of mine. It would have been in the 11 through 20, but for some reason, while going back and doing a watch through, I felt 100% different about the movie. I remember watching it, it was late at night, and I was like, let me just get through this one so I can move on to the next one. And yet, I was watching it, and I was loving it from beginning to end, and I couldn't remember what I really initially hated about it. And that is, at number 9, Avengers 2, Age of Ultron. I get it. I'm sure I'm getting a bunch of, he's fucking crazy. I can't believe he rated that. Blah, 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 blah. This guy's a moron. I get it. You guys are probably still mad at me about Thor Ragnarok not being in the top 10. But I really, really like this movie. I don't get it. Like I said, I remember not being a big fan of it. Just thought it was okay when it came out. But watching it a couple weeks back, I really had a good time watching it. I love the beginning. I love their Battle of Hydra in the beginning. Yeah, did they dispatch Hydra a little too quickly? Sure. But there was no, like, big name villains running at the time. It was just a bunch of stationary regular guys, so it was relatively easy for them to dispatch them relatively quick. I love Ultron. I love James Spader's Ultron. I think he is a great villain. Is his mindset a little wonky? Yes, but you gotta remember he's only like a couple days old. You know, he's a baby. But I love James Spader, and I love his delivery of Ultron. I love the way he does the dialogue of Ultron himself, and I'm a huge James Spader fan, and so because of that, that was one of the things that I got so excited about when Age of Ultron announced its cast list, that Spader was going to play Ultron. I think he did a fantastic job voicing him. We get a cameo appearance of Claw, which anyone who knows me knows that, and I know you can't probably see him in the lower corner here. One of my favorite characters of all time is Smeagol / Gollum from Lord of the Rings. So having anything with Andy Serkis in it is always a huge bonus point for me. So having Claw be in this movie was a huge bonus point for me. I love the action set pieces. Even though it does maybe go a little too long at the end, like Battle of New York, I liked the battle on Sokovia. I liked that whole introduction. I liked that they had to protect this one central location and couldn't let any of them touch it, so they had to bind together to stop it. I like how, and one of the big parts of it that I like the most is I love that this was the beginning to start to see the cracks that led to Civil War. I love that this was the moment we first started to see Tony and Cap start to get into their little skirmishes, and learning that this is where it really did start. And you had Thor, even though Thor wasn't in Civil War. This is where you started to see that Civil War was a possibility in this film, because this is where they first were really at odds outside of their initial meetup in the Avengers, where you could start to see sides being placed and stuff happening right there. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I was actually totally into the Black Widow Hulk romance. I thought it worked really well for ScarJo and Mark Ruffalo's character. I thought it gave them something to do in the film, which they both tend to get shortchanged. I love the Hawkeye storyline. Hawkeye always gets shortchanged, but I loved it, mainly in Thor. But I loved that we gave so much more to his character and gave his character life and added some stakes to Hawkeye's character by introducing his family and his wife, and how he constantly always told people that he didn't have a girlfriend because he was trying to keep them away from that lifestyle, but yet she knew everyone. I loved that storyline of them, and I loved that Nat knew all of them. because obviously she's the closest person to Clint. Like I said, there's so much to like about this movie. I get why people don't like it. I get that there was a lot of problems on set, and Joss Whedon was just mentally exhausted from it and just didn't want to do it. But I still enjoyed the hell out of it. Scarlet Witch was a nice addition. I mean, she gets stronger as the franchise goes on, but I thought she was good. The only thing I didn't really care for was I wasn't a huge fan of Aaron Taylor. Aaron Taylor. It's not Johnson. Is it Johnson? Yeah, Aaron Taylor Johnson. I wasn't a huge fan of Aaron Taylor Johnson's performance as Quicksilver. He was fine, but to me, he was the weak link in the film overall. And his death, while impactful in a way because they finally killed one of the heroes, you killed someone who, A, was the weakest part of the team, and B, didn't really build enough of a rapport for us that we would have actually cared about his death. It was actually more impactful because of Scarlet Witch's reaction and Clint's reaction than the actual death itself, and that's what made it strong. It wasn't because we lost Quicksilver. It was more or less because of Clint and Scarlet Witch's reaction overall. So I actually really, really enjoyed this movie. Plus, it obviously sets off the path to the breadcrumbs to start going to the Sokovia Wars, which leads to Civil War. I know it's not the actual final point because that goes into Civil War, but I think this movie gets shit on way too hard for what it is. And I feel like if people would go back and rewatch it, they would probably see it a little bit different. I'm not saying you guys would love it as much as me, but I think a lot of people watched it the first time it came out, and because it wasn't the Avengers film from the first one, and didn't have the same witty banner, which I think it still does, aka language, that a lot of people just kind of were hard on it right from the get-go. And, not watching it for years later, till now, it felt like an entirely different experience for me, and I really, really enjoyed the film overall. And that is why it is at my number 9 of the list. Going to number 8 is Black Panther. Do I think this movie's overrated? Absolutely. Do I think this movie should have been a Best Picture nominee? Hell no. Hell no. It wasn't even the second best horror film. It wasn't even the second or third best superhero movie of 2018. But it was still a really solid superhero film, nonetheless. I love all the characters. I thought all the characters were great. Especially, obviously, Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger. I thought he was a fantastic villain. Obviously, we got more of Andy Serkis as Claw. I loved Winston Duke's M'Baku. Shiri was great. Even Nakia, I thought was great. Everyone in the cast is solid. And this does have a Dark Knight problem with T'Challa, where he's literally the fourth or fifth best part of the film. Just like in Dark Knight, Batman was like the fourth best character in the movie behind Joker, Two-Face, and Commissioner Gordon. T'Challa's the same way. He's like the fourth or fifth best character in the film. That is nothing against Chadwick Boseman's performance of T'Challa. It's just that we got introduced to all these new characters, and I enjoyed them more than T'Challa's character. He's still great in the movie. It's a lot of fun. Yes, is the movie a lot like Lion King 2 Simba's Pride, for anyone who's watched that movie? Yes, it is. It's very, very, very similar, actually. But that's not a knock on it. It was just, I was watching them like, this is Lion King 2. But with superheroes. Like I said, but it looks amazing. The Wakanda looks incredible. And to me, my favorite part is when he would go and talk to his father in the... I'm blanking on what that area is called, but like the jungle with the purple sunset. I love the visuals of that. I thought it looked amazing. I love the waterfall battles between him and M'Baku and Killmonger. I thought that was a phenomenal stage that they shot at for that scene. The problems with the movie are two things. Or three things, actually. Does it start off a little slow? Yes. But it does pick up. But the first 20 minutes does drag a little bit. Because, like I said, they're introducing a lot of characters, so, I mean, it can drag a little bit in the beginning. Is the final battle a little too CGI heavy? Yes. Now, normally I don't knock that, because, I mean, hey, look at, Avengers Battle of New York and Age of Ultron. Those had plenty of CG, and I love those battles. It was more or less the battle with Killmonger and Black Panther in the tunnel, the subway tunnel. It looked really, really old school CGI. They're better than that. They could have done better than that. I would have much preferred to just watch those two fight without the Black Panther suits, because I felt like that would have looked better and probably would have held more weight, because it's just generic Black Panther against generic Black Panther that you can only tell which one's which because one's yellow, one's purple. Part of me would have much preferred them not to have their masks on, so we could have actually seen some facial reactions from Michael B. Jordan and Chadwick Boseman. And the big problem I have with this film is that you killed off Killmonger and Claw. Two fantastic villains that could have been put into further and further films. Not saying that they won't pop up eventually based off of what happens with Endgame, but those were two of the better villains in the MCU, and that's always been one problem with the MCU, that they have a villain problem. That their villains aren't strong enough outside of Loki and Thanos. And I liked Ultron, but I mean, some people didn't. Claw and Killmonger were two fantastic villains that you could have kept alive and had them pop up in future installments, whether it just be the Black Panther films or other Marvel films overall, and you killed them off, which was the dumbest thing you could possibly do in this movie, because they are way too strong like villain characters. Plus, they're basically Black Panther's version of the Joker in terms of level of bad, just like the Mandarin is to Iron Man. You don't kill those characters off. You keep them alive and you keep them around like they did with Loki. And they dispatched both of them in this movie. And that was a huge knock on me, because they were two of the best parts of the film, and they should have never had been killed off. And because of that, that takes a big downgrade for me. And that is why Black Panther comes in at the number 8 spot. Going to number 7, I just went ahead and blocked these two together. So number 6 and number 7 are Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and Volume 2, with Volume 2 coming in at the number 7 spot. I know there are a lot of people who didn't like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, or even the first one for that matter, but there are a huge number of people who love them. I am one of those people. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy series. I'll talk about Volume 2 here real quick, because it is number 7, and then I'll immediately go to the first one with number 6. I really, really like the second one. Is it as good as the first? I feel like Guardians 1 and Guardians 2 are equal to each other. There are things that are better in Guardians 1 than Guardians 2, and there are things that I like better in Guardians 2 than Guardians 1. So because of that mix match, I mean, I like them both evenly. I do give the nod to Guardians 1 because of the one main issue between the first two, and that is in Guardians 2, the problem is that you separated the Guardians for the bulk of the film. And that was the best part of the first film, was their chemistry and their interactions with one another, working as a team and working together. And in this film, you get them for like the first 10 minutes, and you get them in the last half, in the third act of the film. But the whole rest of the film, they are splintered off and separated. Does those scenes work without everyone? Yeah, but I would have much had preferred having the whole group there together, instead of it being Gamora, Peter, and Drax in one group, and then having Groot and Rocket and Nebula in the other group with I'm blanking on his name real quick. I'm having a brain fart. With Yondu. I don't know why I forgot Yondu's name, because Yondu's effing awesome. But like I said, their scenes are great. I like them. I love Kurt Russell as Ego. I know a lot of people, and I've heard this before, I know a lot of people had a problem with the scene where Ego tells Peter that he put cancer in his mother's head, and then he turns to David Hasselhoff. And a lot of people thought that was kind of like what my argument was with Thor Ragnarok, is that you had this incredibly gut-wrenching moment turn into a comedic scene, which ruined the moment. Me personally, I didn't see it that way. How I saw it was that he knows the story of Peter telling people that David Hasselhoff was his father on Earth, So he changes himself to David Hasselhoff to throw Peter off guard for a split second so he can hit him from behind with that tentacle charger thingy. So I didn't see it as a comedy point. I saw it as a clever point to distract the guy who's shooting at you to take control of the scene. I know a lot of people don't see it that way, but that's how I saw it, and that's why I was okay with it. A gut-wrenching end of the movie as when they kill off Yondu, and a beautiful send-off to the Yondu character with all the Ravagers showing up and giving him the I can't remember what they call what the ceremony is, but they give it to him. It's a beautiful scene. The whole scene at the end is tear worthy. I mean, I get emotional watching it. I don't say I cry per se, but I definitely get an emotional scene out of it. Like I said, I love the interaction between Yondu and Rocket. Most of their stuff works. Is the Ravagers not done so well? Absolutely. I'm not a big fan of the Ravagers. There's a few of them that have one of those annoying faces that you want to punch, which I get. That's probably the point. But some of them just get way too many screen time. Way too much screen time. Sorry. And to the point where it's cringeworthy with the Ravagers. But when the Ravagers aren't around, Yondu and Rocket scenes actually work really well. I love their heart-to-heart talk in their cell. And then, of course, you bring in the Baby Groot part of it with him trying to find the Finn. I thought was great. Everything, I mean, does it drag a little bit on Planet Ego with Peter and his dad, and then you have the whole Gamora. I actually loved everything with Gamora and Nebula. I loved that particular storyline. I actually wish they would have delved a little bit more into it, because I think the Nebula Gamora storyline is such a strong scene that they don't fully ever get to develop into it. I wish we would have gotten more, especially with what ends up happening the next time we see them in Infinity War. Drax and Mantis, I think, are a great combo, and I think they're hilarious. The Sovereign, they were, to me, the weakest part of the movie. I didn't really much care for them. Do they have some funny moments, like with the video game battle sequences? Sure. But other than that, I didn't really care for them, and that was the kind of the weak point. But Guardians 1 also has the villain problem. But I think Kurt Russell was a great villain as Ego. I also love the opening. I love the opening where they're all working together, fighting a big monster, and you just have Baby Groot dancing in the foreground where all the battle's happening in the background. I think all that works. The soundtrack's not nearly as strong as the first film, but I mean, that's a music issue. But that's what Guardians is so powerful at, is their music. Yeah, but that's Volume 2. I really enjoyed it. I don't get why people hate it so much. Sometimes I feel like it's just people that want to hate on things just to hate on it. And I thoroughly enjoyed Volume 2, and that's why it comes at number 7. Number 6, going to the first volume of Guardians of the Galaxy. I love this movie. I love these characters that are so unique and different from one another coming together and working together in the movie. It's a little more grounded, as much as you could say, for a space film. But I love the I just love the connection for everyone, how they kind of build and grow as a family to the end of the film, where you have Drax wanting to cut Gamora's throat, right, when he sees her for the first time, to her calling her his friend. I loved all that. Yeah, Ronan's a weak villain. I don't think him necessarily is weak. I think they made him weak because they just didn't want to give him enough screen time, because they were trying to give the Guardians as much screen time together as possible, which I understand and I get that, but you gotta do that to a point where it doesn't hinder the villain, because this is a character that pops up in further films, like Captain Marvel. You gotta build him up and make him strong, so when he returns in other films, you're not going, oh, that guy? So could they have done a better job with Ronan? Absolutely. Like I said, super funny. Both films are super funny. The chemistry with the team works great. I personally love the Star Wars dogfight scene in the final battle when they're all trying to break into Ronan's ship. I love the visuals of that because it immediately made me think of Star Wars. I love that in the best Peter Quill way possible. When everything looks to be over, he does a freaking dance off to distract him while Drax and Rocket are trying to get their gun working. It's such a Guardians of the Galaxy thing to do that I loved it. And I don't know why, but for some reason I shed a tear at this movie at the exact same scene every time. And no, it's not when Groot dies, which is a sad moment. but it is the scene when Peter is holding on to the stone, and he hears Gamora say, "Take my hand," and he looks over to his right, and it's his mother saying, "Take my hand," and he says, "Mom," with a tear going. I was like, that scene for some reason always gets me, because it's the one moment he regrets and he wishes he could take back, is as a young boy when his mom says, "Take my hand," and he runs away scared. It is a huge scene in my eyes that probably doesn't get enough recognition, that I personally love, and it brings a tear to my eye every time I see it. And because of all those things, that's why I give Guardians the spot above Volume 2, because the chemistry of the team is a lot stronger, and it's funnier in a way that I laughed more with that than I did with Volume 2, even though I love Volume 2 as well. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 comes at the number 6 spot, and we are now going into the top 5 MCU movies. Coming in at number 5 is one that I personally really love. A lot of people are just kind of indifferent on it, and they think it's okay, or they like it, but I really loved it, and that is Spider-Man Homecoming. I really enjoyed Spider-Man Homecoming. I think Tom Holland is a fantastic, he's a fantastic Peter Parker, and he's a fantastic Spider-Man. That has been the problem that we have had with the Spider-Man franchises, is that we have one good part and one bad part. And Batman's the same way, where we have a good Batman and a not-so-good Bruce Wayne. Or we've got a great Bruce Wayne, but not a great Batman. Spider-Man's kind of been the same way, where we have a really good Peter Parker, but not a good Spider-Man. Or we have a really good Spider-Man and not a good Peter Parker. Tobey Maguire, a really great Peter Parker, not so great of a Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield, a great Spider-Man, not a good Peter Parker. Tom Holland looks to finally actually have the right formula, where he's a great Spider-Man and he's a great Peter Parker, and they mesh well perfectly. I love Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. I love that Iron Man and Happy are also big parts in this film as well, because for anyone who was not 100% sold on the Spider-Man film as well, you do get the team up with Iron Man and Happy in the film to kind of bring those extra people into it. Could they have given Zendaya more to do with Mary Jane, or have actually casted someone else as Mary Jane? Sure. I like her, but they don't give her a whole lot to do, and I think they're going to do more of that with Far From Home when it comes out in July. So I can't really knock that, because it's not their story. It is Peter's story. Do I wish they would have held off on the Mary Jane and done a Gwen Stacy storyline? Yes, but they did technically just do that with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, so I understand why they wanted to go away from that. But yeah, I loved the high school parts. I loved everything inside the school. I thought it had great humor. A lot of people called this movie Breakfast Club with superheroes, and I agree with that. Kind of like with Ant-Man, they called it Ocean's 11 with superheroes. And Winter Soldier is a spy movie with superheroes. I love the high school aspect of it. I love that there was high school stakes in the film because of the trivia stuff and them having to study. I love that Peter had to actually juggle that, because in the other movies he's graduated from high school when he becomes Spider-Man, or he's in college or stuff like that. And so it's like, those are things that's like, you don't necessarily have to go to college. I mean, you should, but it was more or less like he couldn't keep a steady job. This one, he's in high school. Like, that's all he has to worry about is high school and being a superhero. And even then, it's hard to juggle. I love Michael Keaton as Vulture. Do I think that we could have gotten more of Michael Keaton in the movie? I mean, I would always love more Michael Keaton. But that scene in the car, when Michael Keaton realizes who Peter is such an incredible scene between those two. And to the point that, if Peter, because he's younger, could he have taken care of him in that car? Absolutely he could have. Was that threat for Vulture really that that bad for Peter? No, because Peter could have stopped him. But because he's a kid, he doesn't think like that at that moment, because he's still so brand new to the superhero thing, that it struck fear in him to the point that it ruined his date. But then halfway through, once he got to dance, the hero in him rose up, and he had to do it. I love all the Spider-Man Easter eggs in the movie, because it introduces villains that aren't ready to be popped in yet. I love the Miles Morales tip of the hat. I love Donald Glover being in the movie as Uncle Aaron, even though we would have all loved him to be Miles Morales, but he's too old for that now. The only negative that I've got in this movie, if there is one, and I don't even think this is a negative, it's just I felt like this is where people would probably think that the movie was a little too long, was that there was one too many fight scenes in the film. Mainly the car chase scene through the neighborhood. That one went way too long. And I could feel like if there was any part of the movie that if they felt they could have cut some time on to make the movie a little bit shorter, that would have been the scene that I probably would have removed, or at least cut half of it to make the film a little bit tighter. But other than that, I love this movie. And I also love that they didn't fully give it an origin story, because we all know the origin story of Peter Parker. We've seen it twice now in the last, decade and a half. We didn't need to retread that particular storyline. So him already being Spider-Man to start the film worked brilliantly in this. So it's like a backwards origin story in a sense, because we didn't need to know it, because everyone knows the story of Spider-Man, just like we all know the story of Batman. So yeah, that's why Spider-Man comes in right at the number 5 spot. Outside of a battle sequence, I really can't think of anything that I did not like about Spider-Man Homecoming, and that is why it is rated number 5 overall. Going to number 4, we have, and this one's going to be a little bit controversial for some, because some people like this movie, and some people hate this movie. I love this movie. So coming in at number 4 is Captain America, The First Avenger. I personally don't understand the hate for this movie. This movie is freaking fantastic. I love everything about this film for the most part, and I don't get all the hate it gets. Is it because people didn't want a World War II movie and they wanted a superhero movie? Was it because it took too long for him to become Captain America? I don't know. I don't get what their problem is. And I get that this is where people are going to argue with me about the Doctor Strange thing, that it took too long for him to become Doctor Strange. It takes a long time for Steve Rogers to become Captain America. I get that. But this is the right length of having to build his character up. From him having to being a small, skinny nobody who has a hero's heart, but no one takes him seriously, to finally having someone recognize his heart and putting him in the program, to him sacrificing his life to save everybody who all treated him like shit, to him getting the serum, and then having this unbeknownst power, but then still not being able to save the one person who believed in him, to then becoming basically a popularity prop, and not being taken seriously, to that moment where he has to decide, do I break the rules and save the day, or do I follow the rules because I'm a good boy and keep being a prop, to him having to break the rules, become the hero he becomes to be, and then we get to Captain America. Those building blocks are amazing, and I love how Chris Evans builds Steve Rogers up through this film, and how everyone looks at him so unconvincingly throughout, and because of how his character is portrayed and how his performance goes with the story, you see people starting to turn their opinions around on him, and falling in love with the Steve Rogers character throughout, mainly Peggy, and even Tommy Lee Jones's character, Colonel Chester Phillips. I love how they build this character. I like Red Skull. I think Red Skull's a great villain. Once again, could they have given Red Skull some more scenes? Yes, to make him a little bit stronger. But I think he was pretty strong as it is. And even then, he has good back and forth with Iron Man, with Captain America when they actually do talk. I think that they do a great job developing that history, and it's not like you need that much more to get Red Skull and Captain America hating each other, because he's a Nazi, and he's part of the reason why Bucky died. Sorry, talking so much and my throat's getting dry. I love their dynamic. The only negative I could have came up with while watching this was that maybe there was one too many montages. And so, maybe take one montage out. Other than that, I love this movie. I love, I love like I said, the beautiful build, the heartfelt ending to the movie, where Captain America finally seems to have all he wants. He saves the day. He's got the girl. But then it comes down to the fact that he either has to sacrifice himself to save New York, which is his home, or lose or have the girl. And he chooses the superhero route of saving everybody and not the girl, which shows just how pure of heart Steve Rogers really is, to the point that he never gets to have that moment with Peggy, and it's heartbreaking. And I thought that Captain America First Avenger is probably the best well-rounded superhero origin story of any superhero films overall, because it tells the true build to an actual superhero. And that comes from a lot, because I'm not a Captain America fan before the films came out. I never thought Captain America was anything special, and I just thought his character was kind of lame, kind of like Cyclops in X-Men. I know that's a hot take, that's probably going to piss people off for saying that. But the way Chris Evans does the performance of Captain America, and the way Chris Evans does what he does in this film, made me fall in love with the Captain America character. And for people who are following this video and have been keeping track of the list, this should tell you how much I love the performance of Chris Evans as Captain America and the way they do the movies, because the other two movies have not been called yet. So that should give you a good takeaway of how I feel about the Captain America storyline and the movies in general. That Captain America First Avenger comes in at number 4 on the list. Going to number 3 is now before I jump into the top 3, these top 3, I love all of them equally. Any of these top 3 could be number 1. And in fact, at least 5 times while working on this list, all 3 of these movies had the number 1 spot. And they were just constantly being flipped around. So this top 3, to me, are all number 1 in my eyes. I love all 3 of these films. I think all 3 of these films are the top MCU movies of the MCU verse. But because I'm doing a ranking, I did have to put them in an order, and the only reason I put them where they're at on this is because 2 of them I could find slight problems with, and the number 1, I personally couldn't find anything wrong with it, so that's why it's the number 1. Do 2 and 3 hold a lot more emotional weight for me than the first one? Absolutely, but number 1 to me is almost a perfect film in how it's shot and how it's done, and that's why it takes the number 1 spot over these other 2. But bear in mind, these top 3 are the cream of the crop to me and are the best ones out there. Going in at number 3 is Avengers Infinity War. I loved Avengers Infinity War. I think I went and saw it 3 times in the first week in theaters. The heartbreaking ending, let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. Not even just the ending. This movie is so heartbreaking throughout. Even the beginning, when they kill Heimel, which I'm a huge Idris Elba fan, so when they killed Heimel, I was heartbroken. When they killed Loki, or we think they killed Loki, I mean, Loki does have a TV show coming out, and we don't know if it's going to be present or past. But the death of them, the Gamora death scene, which I'm going to touch on more of that later. There's just heartbreaking scenes throughout this film. Even the moment where Tony is about to call Steve because he knows he needs Steve's help, but he doesn't because of the Civil War, and he's still too hurt from the relationship between Steve and Tony, is heartbreaking. When Peter finds out about Gamora, I know a lot of people hate that scene, but I feel like that scene was well done perfectly, and it falls totally in line with the Peter Quill character that he would do that. Heartbreaking scene. But then, of course, obviously the big ending where this happens and everyone starts withering away. Now, could they have done it better where when certain people vanish, you're like, oh, well, they're clearly coming back because we know that they're getting sequels, aka Spider-Man and Black Panther? Yeah. But I also don't think they thought Black Panther was going to be as big as it was because they had filmed Avengers Infinity War when they were basically doing Black Panther. Would they have changed it probably now based off of what they knew? Absolutely. But yeah, it is what it is. But knowing, and I know they don't say this in the film, you only can find this out in an article, but knowing that Groot says Dad to Rocket as he's vanishing, just rip your heart out and throw it on the ground. Everyone else vanishing. Black Panther vanishing in front of Okoye's eyes. Bucky vanishing in front of Steve. Falcon vanishing off alone while War Machine's looking for him, and no one actually fully knowing that Falcon disappeared. The death of Vision, where Scarlet Witch has to kill him. because that's the only way to save everybody. And knowing that the one person that she loves, she has to destroy while she's holding off Thanos is such a powerful scene. And then to only have Thanos go, redo, and then have to watch Thanos die, or have to watch Vision die again in front of her eyes before she vanishes herself. Heartbreaking. And then, of course, Peter Parker, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. I mean, Waterworks, when that scene happened. That whole movie is just one big heartbreaking film. To the point, I still remember opening night, and it's going to be a scene that I'm always going to remember. Opening night, I sat in a sold-out theater and watched Avengers Infinity War, and when the movie ended, usually in a normal film, you have people talking, you have people clapping, you have people getting up and leaving. With our theater, when that movie went to black and the credits started to roll, no one got up. No one was talking. Everyone just sat there in complete and utter silence and just despair on how that movie ended. And just reliving that or revisualizing that in my head right now, I'm getting goosebumps because that's how powerful when this movie ended, how it resonated with people, is that for a solid 2 minutes, no one said a word when the credits were rolling because of what had just happened. No one could believe that that's how the movie ended. So yeah, the heartbreakingness of everything with it was insane. Thanos. I to this day think that Josh Brolin's performance of Thanos should have been recognized and should have been nominated for supporting actor. Yeah, is he CGI through the movie? Of course he is. But I think that he does such a great job as Thanos, adding layers to the character, that the only two other villains that come remotely close to him is Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger, which some people said he should have been nominated for supporting actor, and then, of course, Tom Hiddleston as Loki. Thanos' character does such a great job from being vengeful, to being villainous, to being dangerous, then flipping the script and adding so much layer to his character, showing that how much he actually does love Gamora. And that scene on the cliff where he, when Red Skull tells him the only way you can get the stone is by sacrificing something you love, and then having Gamora go, ha, well, you don't love anything, and then her seeing Thanos' face and realizing that he does love her, and then watching Gamora, who's been acting like a cocky asshole to him the entire time, crumble and actually become the little girl begging Daddy not to throw her off the cliff. Holy crap, that's an amazing scene. And Josh Brolin and Zoe Saldana do a phenomenal I said Zoe. It is Zoe. But they do a phenomenal performance in that scene. I love this movie. It's a fantastic film. The only two things I can come up with, and this is why it fell to 3 for me, is that the Black Order is completely wasted. I loved Ebony Maw. I wanted more of Ebony Maw. But I also feel that the other 3 were completely wasted as well. You don't cast someone as amazing as Carrie Coons to be, I think it was Proxima Midnight, I think it was her name. You don't cast her to be that character and then not utilize her. I mean, she does get lines, unlike the rest of the group, but I feel like she could have been used a lot more, just like Ebony Maw could have. And then the other 2, like I said, I can't remember their names because they're not important. I feel like the movie, if it had more time, or if it was given the same time runtime as Endgame's going to be, we would have gotten a lot more out of them. But for being such like the core group that follows Thanos and being Thanos' minions, I feel like they should have been a little bit stronger and had more meat to their characters to add a little bit more to it. And then the other negative would be that some characters do get shortchanged. Black Panther gets shortchanged, but that's because I don't think they expected Black Panther to be as big as his character ended up being in the films. Captain America, pretty much everyone in Wakanda gets shortchanged in the film, because most of the focal point does go to Titan. So while their scenes are great, and I love their scenes, could they have been given some more screen time? Yes, but once again, the movie was already at 2.5 hours long, So it was hard to kind of fit that many people, as well as the Black Order, giving them more lines. So I mean, if there are negatives, those are the negatives to Avengers Infinity War. But yeah, I love the Battle of New York, as small as it was, and even though it doesn't, range that far in the actual landscape of New York, I liked the little fight that they had. I thought it was a fun little fight. I loved Peter joining in the middle of it and not really knowing what was going on, but he just, like the hero he does, he just jumps right into it. I love the back and forth between Ebony Maw and Tony Stark. The Battle of Wakanda was great. I love that the M'Baku showed up. I love the back and forth between Groot and Steve Rogers. I am Groot. I am Steve Rogers. All the interactions in the Wakanda fight were great. I love the Titan fight. I thought the Titan fight was incredibly well done. And like I said, I fully bought into the Peter storyline where Peter completely F's up the entire plan because he finds out Gamora's dead. All of that worked for me, and I thought it was all incredibly well done. And if you haven't noticed yet, the top 3 films all are Russo brothers directed films, and I think the Russo brothers are the best directors when it comes to the MCU movies. I think they know what they're doing. I think they're the best at putting these movies together, and they do a fantastic job here with Infinity War. I could keep talking about Infinity War, but I'm going to cut it now so that way we can move on to the last 2. So yeah, Avengers Infinity War comes in at the number 3 spot, and we go to number 2, which is Captain America Civil War. I love Civil War. I think it's a fantastic film. I see why some people think it's overrated. I see why some people have problems with it, but I love this movie. The airport scene is one of my favorite scenes in the MCU. The battle between all the heroes. We actually get a battle with hero versus hero, and watching them counter their special abilities and knowing how to counter the abilities, and their banter back and forth works incredibly well. And that at the end there was some weight and some repercussions to the fight that happens because of what they did at the airport. I'm glad they didn't just fight and all get away and act like nothing happened. I love that there was some actual repercussions to it, whether it be in War Machine being injured or all the Cap side getting arrested. Was the villain in Zemo a little weak? Sure. But the villain, and a lot of people don't realize, the villain is not the important part of the film. He's literally a point in the film to get, because the movie, Civil War is not about the villains. Civil War is about the heroes fighting the other heroes. You didn't need a big villain in there. You just needed someone who was already, like I said, what we saw in Age of Ultron, the cracks were already starting to form with the Avengers in there. You just needed someone to come in and just chip that last piece to completely let it to crumble. And I think Zemo does a great job, and his reasoning for doing it is a great job. Do I feel like the Winter Soldiers in the movie could have been used so we could have had a little bit more dynamic of a battle? Sure, but they weren't needed. We didn't need villains in this film. The villains were the heroes. And their size they had to choose, and that's what made this movie incredibly strong. I love the debut of Black Panther and Spider-Man. I thought they had fantastic debuts to the point where we got a little bit of taste of both of them, so when they both came out with their films, we already knew who they were, and we didn't have to do a full-on origin story like with Captain Marvel, so we got to have a taste of them beforehand. I love their interactions and their introductions into the film, mainly Spider-Man, probably more so than anyone else. But of course, the most important thing overall was the Steve Rogers and Tony storyline, and Bucky. That story is so powerful, and it is such a strong storyline. From them having that slight disagreement in the beginning of the film. Also the opening battle with Crossbones, I thought was incredibly well done. I love that Crossbones outsmarts them. And technically, even though he dies, he wins that battle. That is a failure for the Avengers. Or at least a core group of the Avengers. Because, I mean, not everyone's there because Hulk and Thor are off in I'm guessing Sakaar during this time. I love that that it is considered a failure. And I love that Scarlet Witch has that guilt towards what she did, and she didn't just blow it off. I love that they had that resonate to her, and that was a very important part of her character in Civil War. But the Tony-Steve dynamic carries this entire franchise. Without those two's relationship and Bucky's, the MCU wouldn't be nearly as strong. And you see the cracks forming in Age of Ultron to the point where you see it go full-blown explosion in this movie, to the point that it even still resonates in Infinity War. Like I said, when Tony knows that he needs when he knows he needs Steve's help in Infinity War, and he looks at that phone and he sees Steve's name, but he just can't bring himself to call Steve, it shows that the events of Civil War are still strong and still resonate in Tony all the years later, because I think it was like 2-3 years since Civil War. I love that was such a huge focal point. I love the interaction at the end of the film when you find out who Bucky killed, aka Tony's parents, and that Steve still at this time will not let Tony have Bucky, because a lot of people don't realize how important. I mean, people should realize how important Bucky is to Steve, that he is the one and only person to have ever been there for Steve from beginning to end. Before he had the powers, Bucky was there for Steve. Bucky is Steve's world in a non-gay way. And that he will defend him till his dying breath. And that Tony thought that he was Bucky to Steve, but realized that he really isn't. He's the third wheel of this group. And that's heartbreaking to Tony, because Tony thought him and Steve were like brothers, but then when you realize that no, Bucky and Steve are brothers, you're just the best friend, and you're always going to pick your brother over your best friend. And the heartbreakingness to Tony, A, finding out that his parents were murdered by Bucky, and B, that his best friend, or in his mindset, his brother, sides with the guy who murdered his parents, and then fights along the guy who murdered your parents, and at the end, destroys your suit, to the point where Tony loses his cool at the end and basically acts like a child, saying that you don't deserve this shield. That's my father's shield, and you're basically disrespecting Howard Stark's name by keeping that shield and wearing that shield, because you're defending the guy who murdered him. You don't deserve that shield. And Steve realizes that, and Steve understands that, and instead of being an asshole and keeping the shield, like the true hero Steve is, drops the shield, dropping thus the moniker of Captain America. It's such a powerful scene, and it's done incredibly well by Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. Yeah, Bucky's just kind of there. I mean, Bucky's a very reserved character, but he doesn't need to say anything. He doesn't need to pitch anything, because everything is about Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, and they knock it out of the park. One big scene that I would love pointing out, too, is in the middle when Bucky breaks out of the cell, and he's fighting Tony, and Bucky doesn't really, I guess, know who Tony is, but when Bucky's got the gun and he shoots it, and Tony puts his hand over it, and you see Bucky actually shoots it, Tony's expression or reaction to that, like, you were actually going to shoot me in the face. I love that scene. That scene speaks levels to me to show that how far Bucky can go, and that Tony really realizes how dangerous Bucky really is as a person. And his reaction, that reaction to me is raises so much powerful, and it's probably a reaction that not enough people notice or remember or care about. And I feel like that reaction by Tony at that moment is huge to the actual story that we get further on. And that's why Civil War is my number 2 movie of the year, or of the MCU, of the year, is my number 2 movie of the MCU, and why, I get why people think it's overrated, I get why certain people don't like the movie overall, but those reasons that I just mentioned are why it is my number 2 film of the MCU verse. Thus going to the number 1 MCU movie, and it's number 1, it's probably in everyone's top 3, so it's not a big surprise here, and that goes to Captain America, the Winter Soldier. This movie is borderline perfect for me. I can't, when people go, I've been coming up with weaknesses for every film that we've been talking about. I don't have a weakness for this movie. I can't think of one thing wrong with this movie overall. Yeah, does it hold the emotional weight or the levels of heartache or anything like the previous two films did, or any of the MCU movies. No, it doesn't. But it is pound for pound, from beginning to end, the strongest, the most well-written, and changes the focal landscape of the MCU in this film. Literally, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV show, changes and becomes an entirely different show because of what Winter Soldier does. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV show, was a very lackluster, kind of about ready to get canceled TV show. And then Winter Soldier happens, changes the whole landscape of that show, and now that show is still going on to this day. And if it wasn't for the events of Winter Soldier, that show still wouldn't be around. That show would have been canceled because it wasn't doing much. But because of the storyline element of finding out that Hydra has been S.H.I.E.L.D. all along, and that becoming a focal point for the TV show, that is what kept the TV show going for what it is today. And that tells you how powerful this film is that it was able to save a floundering TV show and making it a cult hit, and still going on to this day. I think they're going into their last season. It hasn't come out yet, but I think they're getting ready to do their last season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But it's, what, season 6, season 7 now? To know that it was going to get canceled in season 1, and that it is now going into year 6 or 7 because of this movie, speaks wonders of how great this film is. The opening is freaking amazing between Steve Rogers and George St. Pierre's character. I'm blanking on his character name right now. I loved that whole beginning sequence on the ship. I loved George St. Pierre trying to fight Steve Rogers in the beginning and saying, I thought you were, good without your shield, and and Steve just be like, all right, fine. And then destroys George St. Pierre right away because he doesn't need the shield. And he proves that. That shield twist, like I said, huge. Changes the whole landscape of the MCU from then on out. Is great. I love the spy espionage storyline that Captain America gets, and that's not something that I expected to happen in a MCU movie, and it wasn't, especially a Captain America one. And I love that that's what the movie kind of became, and it was unique, and it was different than any of the other MCU movies that we had seen previously, and it works super well. I love that he teams up with Black Widow to help make that spy espionage film even stronger. I love Scarlett Johansson. I keep calling her ScarJo. I love Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans' chemistry with one another. I love that they have this romantic chemistry, but they're never going to act on it. Not because they don't want to, but just because they don't see each other like that. I love their back and forth. The addition of Emily Van Camp as Agent 13, I think works really well as well, and she becomes stronger in later films. Well, not really, but I mean, she gets introduced as Peggy's niece? Yeah, niece. In the other films, thus giving Steve an opening for a relationship with another Carter. But yeah, I mean, I liked her. I liked Frank Grillo's Brock Rumlow, who later becomes Crossbones in Civil War. Robert Redford's Alexander Pierce was a great villain without having to do something without having to have a final battle villain. I thought he was a really good mastermind villain. Of course, Samuel Jackson gets probably the most screen time outside of Captain Marvel as Nick Fury. I thought he did a great job. Once again, the relationship of Bucky and Steve works well. The reaction to Steve realizing that Bucky's alive after all this time, and then having to fight him at the end, and basically could have stopped Winter Soldier at the end, but because it was Bucky gets the upper hand for the most part of the battle. To the point at the end of the movie, Bucky's the one left standing, but he's able to break through the Winter Soldier thing to bring out Bucky at the end. Everything about this movie works. Everything about this movie is great. Plus, you have the Easter eggs of Doctor Strange and other characters being mentioned in the film, and we were years away from them even coming up in the MCU. But knowing that they were in the verse broadened up our minds to what was coming down the pipe for the MCU films. And like I said, I can't think of anything wrong with Captain America: Winter Soldier, and because of that, that is why Winter Soldier comes in at the #1 slot. And it's very hard for any of these movies to probably take over it, because every movie has some kind of flaw or something that I didn't like or something they could have done better. I can't think of anything for Winter Soldier. Also, I loved how they brought Toby Jones as Dr. Arnim Zola back in for a small role. I love, like, there's so many little things in Winter Soldier that is great that they bring back into the forefront to make that movie stronger. And this was the Russos' first movie in the MCU, and they knocked it out of the park. And like I said, anything with the Russo brothers doing a Marvel film, I am 100% on board with. They have proven that they are the best directors for the MCU. I wish they would do all the movies from now on, but they're not going to. But yeah, so Captain America Winter Soldier, the #1 rated MCU movie of my list, probably of a lot of people's list. And that's basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed my MCU movie rankings. I know it's a long video. Both of them are long videos, but if you guys are true MCU fans, hopefully you guys will stick around and watch all of it. Feel free to hit the like button if you like this video is worth liking. Feel free to share this video if you guys feel this video is worth sharing. But most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on the channel. And also don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below so you guys stay up to date with everything that happens with Sean's Movie Crusades. And I hope you guys enjoy Endgame week, because I can't wait. I'm going to be seeing the very first show on Thursday, and we'll probably be coming home and immediately trying to, just dissect everything that I just watched before I do the review. And like I said, the review will be up early Friday morning. So until next time, guys, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.